The weight of it still feels like a physical burden, a stone in my chest that refuses to be dislodged. It's been years, and the memory of it, the sheer magnitude of the mess I created, still has the power to bring me to my knees. You hear stories about affairs, about broken marriages, but you never think it could happen to you. You think you're somehow immune, that your love is stronger, your commitment unshakable. I was wrong. Utterly and completely wrong. I'm Daniel, and this is the story of how I went from being a loving husband and father, a man who believed in the sanctity of marriage, to someone who betrayed everything he held dear. I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness, because I'm not sure I deserve it. I need to tell you my story, to lay bare the truth, as painful as it is, because maybe in doing so, I can finally begin to understand what led me to the darkness. This is not a tale of passion, but a story of subtle choices that had catastrophic consequences. It's about the slow, almost imperceptible slide into a place where I didn't recognize myself. This wasn't just one mistake. This was an unraveling. Our home, the one on Oakwood Drive, was more than just a structure of brick and mortar. It was a living, breathing entity, a reflection of our life together. The walls held our laughter, our tears, our whispered secrets, the echoes of our children's growing up. I remember vividly the day we first saw it. A young couple, full of dreams and barely any savings. The oak tree in the front yard, with its strong, gnarled branches reaching towards the sky, felt like a symbol of our future, resilient and enduring. We'd spend hours in the yard, envisioning the life we'd build there. We spent countless weekends and evenings renovating the house, painting, landscaping, making the place our own. Sarah had this incredible gift for turning a house into a home. She picked out the warm, inviting colors for the walls, the comfortable, plush furniture. She cultivated the flower beds with such care, coaxing life out of the earth, filling our yard with vibrant blooms that reflected her own vibrant spirit. She had a particular fondness for roses, their delicate beauty mirroring the subtle strength she possessed. She saw the beauty in everything. The swing set in the backyard, now weathered and silent, was once a symphony of happy shrieks and giggles as Emily and Josh soared through the air. Each room held its own story, each corner echoed with memories of birthday celebrations, family gatherings, quiet nights curled up on the couch, talking about everything and nothing. Our life was not one of great adventures, but one of quiet joy. And for a long time, it was enough for me. Sarah and I were different in many ways, but those differences, in the beginning, were what drew us to each other. I was the quiet, methodical one, the one who always followed the rules, while Sarah was the free spirit, the one who challenged conventions and dared to dream big. I was always in awe of her free spirit. She was full of life. We met in college, during a literature class. She was so passionate about books and stories. She would have a special way of looking at things that no one had ever shown me. I was drawn to her energy, and she was curious about my quieter ways. We were like two sides of the same coin, and together we felt whole. Our courtship was filled with long walks, deep conversations, and stolen kisses under the starry night. We'd stay up late talking for hours, each learning more about the other. We got married soon after we graduated. I remember the look in her eyes as she walked down the aisle. It was a day I will never forget. Our life was like a movie, full of happiness and expectations. We rented our first small apartment, filled it with second-hand furniture, and lived off of ramen for months. We were broke, but we were happy. Over the years, our love had shifted. The passionate spark of our youth evolved into a deeper, quieter form of affection. The way we communicated with each other had changed. The shared experiences, the struggles we'd overcome together, had woven a strong bond between us, one that I believed was unbreakable. Or so I thought. We knew each other's quirks, our habits, our unspoken languages. We could communicate with just a look. I felt like I knew her inside and out. Sarah's career was like a natural extension of her personality. She began working at a local bookstore after the kids were older, finding immense joy in surrounding herself with literature and connecting with people who shared her passion for stories. When the library had a new opening, she leapt at the opportunity. She became a beacon in the community, the friendly librarian who knew everyone's name and always had a book recommendation at the ready. It was fulfilling, and she loved it. She seemed to flourish in that environment. Her vibrancy was infectious. She always had a book in her hand. And then there was my world, the one I inhabited behind the glow of the computer screen. I'd become a software developer, drawn to the logic and order of code. It was a world that made sense to me, a place where I felt in control. I'd spend hours working at my computer, immersed in projects that demanded precision and problem-solving. The digital world was my refuge, a place where I could escape the messiness of real life. I had lost a bit of my focus on the outside. My world started to shrink. I started to shut myself from others. Our kids, Emily and Josh, were our pride and joy. Emily, with her sharp intellect and unwavering determination, always had her mind set on her goals. She was a natural leader, always willing to stand up for what she believed in, and had always dreamed of becoming a doctor. She loved to learn new things. She was always studying, always reading. She was a wonderful kid. We were all so proud of her. Josh was the creative one, the artist, with a unique way of seeing the world. He found beauty in unexpected places. His heart was gentle and kind. He was a true artist. He was always creating something, whether it was paintings, or drawings, or music. He always found a way to create art from whatever he could find. They were both so different, but they both held a special place in our hearts. They were the legacy we wanted to leave behind. The thing that had made our relationship feel complete. Their departures for college had left a strange kind of quiet in our house. A silence that was both freeing and a little bit unsettling. It was the first time we had been alone in years. I thought that this might bring us closer, but in reality, we started living even more separate lives. We had become strangers in our own house. It became a place of comfort and routine. A place where we did not need to speak. We were just existing. It was the silence between Sarah and I that began to feel more noticeable. We seemed to have less and less to talk about, like the subjects we once spoke about had been exhausted. I think now that we stopped trying. I realize now, in retrospect, that this was the turning point. The silence between us became a chasm, a space that I allowed to widen with my own indifference. I wasn't present, I wasn't engaging. My focus had become so narrowed that I had failed to see the person right beside me. I became complacent. I stopped trying. And in doing so, I set us all on the path to destruction. My mistake was a slow one. A subtle one. I did not see that I was drifting until it was too late. I was so wrapped up in my own world that I failed to see the signs. I was looking inward, not outward, and I was slowly losing my way. Olivia was a breath of fresh air, or so it seemed at the time. Her presence in the office was like a splash of vibrant color in a room that had grown increasingly gray. She was everything I wasn't, outgoing, spontaneous, and completely comfortable in her own skin. She had an infectious laugh, a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, and I found myself drawn to that. I would look for her in the office, try to catch her eye, and try to have conversations about anything and everything. It began as something innocent, but it quickly became something that consumed my thoughts. It was an escape from the monotonous routine of my everyday life, a temporary reprieve from the silence that had settled between Sarah and me. In the beginning, our interactions were strictly professional, focused on work projects and deadlines. We would work late, finishing up the tasks that had to be done. The office had an entirely different feel late at night. It was almost like our own secret space, where the pressures of the workday faded away, and we could talk freely. We'd talk about our aspirations, our frustrations, our opinions. She'd tell me about her dreams of leaving our town and traveling the world. I found myself drawn to her free-spirited outlook on life. It was something that had never really crossed my mind. She would share her thoughts about her love for art, and I started to see that my life had become so small. We'd share stories of our past. I found that she was the only person that I could be truly vulnerable with. In some ways, it was a breath of fresh air. In others, it was a betrayal to Sarah. The late nights became a ritual, an unspoken agreement that we would stay after everyone else had left. The office was quiet then, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, creating a strange, almost intimate atmosphere. It was as if the world outside didn't exist. We were in our own little bubble. We would share our feelings, our insecurities. I would find myself sharing parts of myself that I had not shared in years. It was like I was finally being seen. I felt a sense of connection that I hadn't felt in a long time. She listened with genuine interest, her gaze making me feel as if I was the most important person in the world. It was an intoxicating feeling, and one I began to crave. I started to forget about my life at home, choosing to focus on what was in front of me. I knew, deep down, it was wrong, but the draw was too strong to resist. The first sign that things were changing was the physical contact. It was subtle at first, a brush of her hand against my arm as she pointed something out on my computer screen, or a brief touch on my back as she walked by. But each touch sent a shock through me, a jolt that awakened something that had been dormant for years. It was a forbidden feeling, but one that I was drawn to. The boundaries became more and more blurred. I stopped thinking about consequences. I stopped thinking about right and wrong. I was acting completely on impulse. Then came the conversations that became more personal, more intimate. We began to share details about our lives that had never crossed the bounds of professional boundaries, our hopes, our fears, our disappointments. It was as if we were building a world of our own, a world that existed outside of the constraints of our everyday reality. I started to feel like I could be myself around her, and that I did not have to pretend to be someone that I was not. It became a safe place for me. But it was a safe place I was not supposed to be in. It was a secret, and I became addicted to that secret. The first kiss was like a crossing of the Rubicon. It was a stolen moment in the darkness of the parking lot, a brief brush of lips that sent a tidal wave of guilt and excitement through me. It was like an electric shock, a jolt that awakened something I thought had died. I could feel my heart beating in my chest. I pulled away, a wave of fear and guilt washing over me. I didn't know what to do, or how to stop, but the temptation was too strong. And I found myself going back, again and again. The news of my infidelity spread through our family like wildfire, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Emily and Josh, once the center of our universe, were now forced to confront the reality of my actions, to reconcile the loving father they had known with a man who had destroyed their family. Emily, ever the compassionate one, tried to understand, to find some explanation for my actions, but the pain in her eyes was palpable. The questions she asked pierced my heart, each one a reminder of the hurt I had inflicted. She would try to understand, but it was clear that she would never be able to forgive me. I had broken her trust. Josh, on the other hand, was consumed by anger and resentment. His normally gentle spirit now filled with a righteous fury that I could not fault. His disappointment was clear. He was angry at me. He did not look at me. He barely spoke to me, choosing silence over confrontation, his silence a potent reminder of the depth of my betrayal. I had become the reason for their pain. I had destroyed the stability that they had always known. And for that, I will never forgive myself. The days that followed were a blur of tearful arguments, accusations, and strained silences. Sarah's emotions swung like a pendulum, from a quiet despair to fits of rage. She would lash out, accusing me of ruining our lives, of throwing away everything we had built, and I could only nod in silent agreement, knowing that she was right. I had become the villain in her story. Her heart was broken, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. I deserved all the anger that was being projected to me. I had become the person I had always feared. I had become a monster. The house, once filled with the warmth of family, now felt cold and empty, the echoes of our past happiness replaced by the harsh reality of our present situation. The familiar rooms became constant reminders of the life we had lost. Every corner seemed to whisper accusations. Every object in the house was a reminder of the happy family I had destroyed. Sarah finally asked me to move out, unable to bear the sight of me any longer. I packed my belongings in silence, my heart heavy with regret and shame. My new apartment was sterile and unfamiliar, a stark contrast to the warmth of our home. It was cold and empty. It felt like a prison. I spent my days in a haze of guilt and self-loathing, replaying the events of the past few months, trying to understand how I had allowed myself to fall so far. The loneliness was suffocating, the silence deafening. I felt utterly alone in the world. The guilt was like a constant companion, a gnawing reminder of the damage I had caused. I tried to reach out to Olivia, hoping to find some solace in her company, but she had retreated, distancing herself from the mess I had created. She said she couldn't be a part of this, that this was my problem, and she was not going to help me with it. She had found her escape, and now I was left with the wreckage of my life. I realized then that she had never truly cared for me. She had only been a temporary distraction, an escape from the life she did not want to live. And I had been foolish enough to believe that it was love. The weight of my actions was crushing, the knowledge that I had hurt the people I loved most a constant source of pain. I was alone in this new life. My family was gone, and I was all alone in this terrible place. The woman I loved hated me. My children were distant. I had lost everything that had once mattered to me, and all because of my own foolishness. I began to spend my days in a fog. I could barely eat. I could barely sleep. I became completely numb. The only thing I felt was guilt. The guilt of having destroyed my family. The guilt of destroy. Looking back now, with the benefit of hindsight and the weight of my mistakes pressing down on me, I realized that infidelity is not about a singular act of betrayal, but a culmination of neglect, a slow erosion of trust and intimacy that can unravel even the strongest of relationships. It wasn't about sex or passion. It was about connection or the lack thereof. It was a manifestation of my own internal struggles, my own insecurities and fears, and a cowardly way to avoid facing the issues that were growing within my marriage. I sought a temporary escape rather than confronting the discomfort that had settled between Sarah and me. I used my unhappiness as an excuse to betray my family. I allowed my own self-pity to justify my actions. In reality, it was my cowardice that destroyed everything. I had stopped seeing Sarah, not just as my wife, but as a person, with her own hopes, dreams, and insecurities. I had taken her for granted, assuming that the love we shared would be enough to sustain us, that we didn't need to actively tend to the flame that had once burned so brightly. I had become complacent, lost in the routines of daily life, and I failed to recognize the signs that were telling me something was wrong. I allowed the silence to grow, the distance between us to expand, and instead of addressing the issue, I ran away from it. I convinced myself that she was the problem, when in reality, it was my own actions that were the problem. I had stopped seeing her as an equal, and instead, started seeing her as the reason for my unhappiness. I've learned that relationships are not static entities. They are living, breathing organisms that require constant nurturing, care, and attention. They need honesty, vulnerability, and open communication, a willingness to share your deepest fears and desires, even when it's difficult, even when it feels uncomfortable. You can't hide things from your partner, and you cannot expect them to know your needs without telling them. I had built a wall between Sarah and me, a barrier of silence and avoidance, and in doing so, I had set the stage for my own demise. I failed to talk to her, and to tell her that something was wrong. I did not give her the chance to help me, and I did not give myself the chance to fix my own actions. My pride got in the way, and I chose the easy route, instead of facing my problems. Infidelity is a selfish act, a betrayal that leaves deep and lasting scars on everyone involved. It's a choice that destroys the fabric of trust, and it can take years to heal from, if it's even possible. The fleeting moment of pleasure or excitement is not worth the price you pay. The pain and suffering that I had inflicted on my wife and children still haunts me to this day. It is a constant reminder of the magnitude of my mistake. I destroyed the love we had, and in its place, created deep wounds that may never heal. And that pain is something I will have to live with. My happiness came at the expense of everyone that loved me. The real work of a relationship is not in grand romantic gestures, but in the quiet, everyday acts of love, respect, and understanding. It's about choosing each other every day, even when the going gets tough, even when it feels easier to walk away. It's about seeing your partner, not as a possession or an obligation, but as an individual, with their own unique needs and desires. I wish I could go back and fix all of the mistakes that I made, but sadly, that is not an option. All I can do is learn from them, and share my story with others. I also know that infidelity is not always about a lack of love, but it's about a lack of courage, a fear of facing your own issues, and an unwillingness to do the work that a relationship requires. It's about searching for validation outside of yourself, instead of looking inward. You cannot find happiness in someone else. You have to find it within. And I had forgotten that. If you find yourself drifting, if you feel the temptation to seek solace outside of your relationship, please, I beg you, stop and consider what you stand to lose. Reach out to your partner, talk to them, tell them how you're feeling, and don't let the silence grow between you. Seek help from a therapist or counselor if needed. It takes courage to confront the uncomfortable truths, but the alternative, the path that I chose, is far more destructive. If I had known what I know now, I would have done things differently. But I didn't. And now, all I am left with is the pain. I hope that my story will serve as a warning to others. I hope that others will learn from my mistakes, and not repeat them. My story is a cautionary tale, a testament to the destructive nature of betrayal, but also, I hope, a reminder of the importance of communication, trust, and commitment. Relationships are hard. They take work. But the work is worth it. My story is one of regret, of a life shattered by a moment of weakness. It's a testament to the destructive nature of infidelity, but also, hopefully, a lesson about the importance of commitment, honesty, and communication. I am not asking for forgiveness, but I hope that my story will serve as a warning. Maybe someone will think twice before making a similar mistake. Maybe they will see what they have in front of them and tend to it rather than destroy it. What are your thoughts? Has this story resonated with you? What lessons do you take away from it? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear this story, and subscribe to the channel for more true confessions.